Welcome back to the wonderful saga that is my Land Cruiser. Now this is part 2 of my steering wheel antics, so if you're interested in seeing part 1, click that thing. Otherwise, let's continue. Now in the last episode, you would have seen me remove this, and the tale came to a swift end when I found this. The problem was that there's only one pin inside it, on both ends, inlet and outlet, which means that you can't really add any steering wheel buttons to it. So I'm going to be changing that with this. However, so basically, this is a clock spring. All it does is it allows you to connect wires and rotate at the same time, if that makes any sense whatsoever. You'd plug one end in here, the other end of the wires come out in the middle, and it lets them rotate independently. Now inside here are the connectors there, and then there's a few coils of wire, which then make it through to the other side. Kind of like an extendable dog lead. So it'll allow it 5 good rotations before something bad happens. And the clue for that is the fact that it says 5 turns there. Now alignment for these is pretty critical. It doesn't really matter if you spin them around a bit, because all you have to do is there's a little alignment window here. So for example, if I give it a full turn to the left, there's nothing in that alignment window. But if I turn it back to how the actual middle point is, you'll see there's a little weird orange thing in there, and that tells you it's in the middle, and that's when you're safe to install it. Now this is the old one, that's the new one. You can see it's all lined up there, looking marvelous. And that's about it. So don't ask me how I managed to get the shot from the last clip, but let's just say it pays to have a few chins under your belt. Anyway, that's the 76 series plug pinned to the Toyota Orion, or however the fuck you say it, steering wheel, which should then plug straight into here. You can ignore this one because this one's for cruise control, which I already have here. So now I can chuck all this back together and worry about the rest. Oh, actually I can't, because I've got to worry about this nonsense now. Now, one thing you want to consider when you're getting wires from the head unit to the clock spring is the fact that the connectors are mirrored. So what you can see is this is the horn wire, and as you can see, it's in the top left position here. Now when you come back to the original clock spring, it's probably really hard to see. Very hard to see. But either way, there's only one pin in there, and it's in the top right corner. So it's basically a mirror image, so keep that in mind when you're wiring. So at this stage, you've probably got to the point where you're thinking, how do I know what wire does what? So to find that out, I have found the connector on the back of the buttons, which you can then find the PCB underneath it. And obviously each of the pins here, it's actually quite easy on this one because these ones are labelled as a DP positive and negative. You've then also got things like T2, T1, T14, which I can only assume is tactile buttons, as that's what type of board this is. And it's very easy to find the tracers on each pin and follow it to which button it goes to. Now it doesn't really matter because you can customize all these buttons anyway, but at least I'll be able to weed out the buttons I don't need and the tracers that I don't need, for example backlights, and just concentrate on the ones that are useful. Also, in the last video, I made an incorrect statement. I thought all of my button wiring was in place, because this is the remote thing that plugs into the back of the radio. And then I found this plug, which plugs into the back of that. But then once I followed it through, I realised it was just some utter nonsense that somebody else has put in. which I don't think is made by Toyota, but I'm going to Google this and see what happens. I might be wrong again. So the challenge of the day is going to be extending this wiring loom and using pins so that it can just be pushed straight into the back of that connector in the back of the clock spring. Now don't worry, I'm fully aware that every single one of you on the internet is an electrical engineer working for NASA. And I will leave the comments section wide open for everyone to criticize my wiring ability. So now that you're sitting comfortably, let us begin. So this is the loom of dreams. We have these 4 pins which are going to feed into the back of that connector. About halfway down, it tees off where it'll draw power from the clock like it did originally. And then we have these 3 really badly focused connectors that go right back into the head unit. Now the only problems I foresee with this is that I was only able to find 4 of these little pins to go into the back of the connector. So that's 3 for the switches, 1 which is a live power, and I'm assuming I'm going to need a ground of some sort. But what I might try and do is ground that internally in the steering wheel. But I'll have to have another look at these random wiring looms I have lying around, like this one, to see if I have any other pins that might fit. And if they do, I'll just add a ground in the circuit as well. Now as you can see, it's far from a cosmetic wiring loom, but what I'll end up doing is adding some conduit to the length of it, whereas this one's already sheathed so I won't need it. However, I've just checked my shelf and I've noticed that I don't have any conduit. I wonder why that is. So I'll probably just not bother. I'll leave it as is. It's not particularly bad and nobody's going to see it anyway because it's going to be behind the head unit. So this might be horrible to look at, but the wiring loom's through. Here's the earth, here's the 3 wires for the remote controls, and here's all the stuff to be pinned into the back of this little connector here. And that should be everything. And as if by magic, it's night time. In case you can't figure it out, this took quite a long time. So what I've ended up doing is looking very carefully at those photos to figure out the wiring. And from there, I've cross-referenced it and plugged it into this socket at the same time. So I'm not going to do a wiring diagram about this because it's very specific to this vehicle now. But as you can see, I'm now able to do things like set up the buttons. Now unfortunately they don't all work just yet, so I think what I've got to do is figure out one of the other wires which might be in the wrong place, but that's a job for another day. So that concludes making a Land Cruiser have steering wheel buttons where it otherwise shouldn't. And I've finished the video now. It's probably not 10 minutes, but you can enjoy clicking the subscribe button while I stand here uncomfortably. Yes, I meant it. Goodbye.